The fastest week in media, my friends. The evidence, it's already Friday. You believe this?
And now, from sunny South Florida, it's Open Line Friday.
That's right. Now, by the way, Open Line Friday, the only way it differs is callers can talk about whatever. Like I don't know. It doesn't have to be about politics. Doesn't have to be things that I'm interested in. Monday to Thursday, it has to be that, but on Friday, it doesn't. So it's just an opportunity for you to go anywhere you want to go, ask whatever question you have, or make any comment. 800-282-2882. Now, before I get to the 4.1% GDP, the economic growth story, I'm sorry, I've got to deal with something CNN has been doing the past couple of days. CNN and the drive-by media, and it's time to once again interject little common sense here. I'm sure you know that CNN has been breathlessly reporting that Michael Cohen, all these tapes with Trump, and Trump said all these incriminating things, and then that Michael Cohen said that Trump knew about the Trump Tower meeting that his son took with the Russian honeypot and all of that, and that Trump has denied knowing anything about. By the way, Cohen doesn't have any evidence for this. He has literally no evidence, and even CNN's been forced to admit this. But let me just try to cause you to have no concern about this. Robert Mueller is relying so little on Cohen that he gave that case to the Southern District of New York. The U.S. attorney for the Southern District of New York has the Cohen case, not Mueller. If Cohen had anything that would help Mueller do anything with Trump, he wouldn't have handed off the case. So what Cohen is doing here is trying to get the best deal he can get from the U.S. Attorney's Office, Southern District of New York. He's trying to make it look like he's got all kinds of dope on Trump, and he'd be willing to give it up. But the thing that you have to realize here is very simple. This is not Mueller's case. He gave it away. He gave it away weeks ago. He transferred anything to do with Cohen to the Southern District of New York, like he's done with pretty much every other charge that he has made in this case. He's sent it off to some other court, some other jurisdiction. The other thing that they're trying to make hay about is Trump and Mueller all of a sudden interested in Trump's tweets. It's preposterous. I don't know where CNN is getting its information, who's leaking to them. But Donald Trump has been tweeting since his campaign. The idea that Robert Mueller just now got interested in him. I mean, if that were true, and it isn't, but if it were true, it would mean that Mueller doesn't have anything. But the idea that Mueller's been ignoring these tweets all this time, but about the tweets are not evidence. The tweets don't show anything. They're nothing more than what Trump's thinking or saying at the time. There's nothing actionable in the tweets. This is like trying to say that exit poll results count more than real votes. There's nothing here. In fact, if any of you are still concerned about this, there isn't going to be an indictment of Donald Trump from the special counsel. The only concern that everybody should have about this is impeachment. That's where this investigation has always been going. That's where this investigation's phony anyway. The Mueller investigation is an offshoot of all of the illegality that took place on the Democrat side and on the Hillary side. And it is simply to cover up all of that, because remember, when this campaign began, the Department of Justice, the Democrat Party, and everybody in the Obama apparatus had to make sure that Hillary Clinton was exonerated of any crimes involving her illegal server and trafficking in classified data. And all of this has been about exonerating her and framing Donald Trump. But there isn't going to be any indictment of Trump. He hasn't obstructed justice. He hasn't colluded. And so all there's going to be is a report that's going to question Trump's fitness, maybe his thinking, maybe his reactions, and it'll be setting up an impeachment proceeding if the Democrats win the House. And as an ancillary thing, maybe they're going to try to, once again, drive Trump's approval numbers down. But this stuff that CNN's hyperventilating with today over Cohen, you just need to stop and think it's not even Mueller's case. Oh, and speaking of that, CNN, I have a piece here. Let's see, this is by Julian Zelizer, or Zelizer, CNN political analyst. Trump sounds normal in private. This is all an act. CNN thinks they figured Trump out. They have been listening to the tapes with Trump on the phone and Trump talking to Cohen, and they have concluded that he sounds normal as anybody else does on the phone. He doesn't sound crazy. He doesn't sound mean. He doesn't sound insane. And so obviously the Trump that appears on TV is acting. And he's acting, you know why he's acting? Because he knows that you, his supporters, are a bunch of lame brain idiots that he has to act for. He has to perform in such a way to make you think that he is a continuing victim, that everybody's out to get him. He has to talk in these mean-spirited, bigoted ways to relate to you. Oh, yeah. That's CNN's latest big discovery. Reading anything into short, grainy tape recordings is difficult, writes this analyst, but from the moment that CNN's Fredo Cuomo shared one of the Michael Cohen tapes, experts have sliced and diced the audio to figure out exactly what Donald Trump knew about a payment to keep his alleged affair with Playboy playmate Karen McDougal off the front pages. As an aside, there isn't even any crime here. You know, Rich Lowry has a piece at National Review, and it's also an instructive piece in how this stuff doesn't work, why it doesn't work. He makes the point that I have made over and over again. This stuff that the Democrats have been pulling on Trump would have gotten rid of every Republican candidate or president in the past. And one of the reasons the Democrats and the media are frustrated is because they can't get rid of Trump using the time-honored techniques that they've always succeeded with. They were able to destroy Romney. They were able to destroy George W. Bush. They've been able to engineer the resignations of Mr. Newt and a bunch of other people in Congress. And what they do is it doesn't touch Trump. And they don't figure it out. They just keep trying to pile on more of the same. And, for example, Lowry says this incident on tape with Trump talking to a fixer about paying off a Playboy playmate would sink anybody. It would sink particularly any Republican candidate. Why doesn't it sink Trump? Well, we've been through all the reasons for this. One of Lowry's explanations is that the bar has been set so low with Trump that no new revelation is going to shock anybody, not after the NBC Access Hollywood video. And so there just isn't anything that's going to shock anybody. Trump's already survived numerous such attempts to take him out. So something like this, as far as Trump supporters are concerned, nothing new here. No reason to get upset. But I think it's far more than that. I think not enough credit's being given to the sophistication of Trump supporters. And it is that it doesn't mean anything when compared to what these people think is really important, like saving the country, like growing the country, like saving our culture. Whether Trump's running around with Playboy playmates is not relevant to them. And they're not going to allow the media to take another Republican out. There's also that part. They're just not going to sit by and let this happen again. Because it happens every election cycle. The media goes after some Republican or whichever effective public figure they want to target. They go after somebody, and somebody always usually scalp is claimed. They're not going to abandon Trump. They're not going to let it happen. They're far more sophisticated this time around than any of these critics realize. But I wanted to get the stuff out about Cohen because CNN once again is falling all over itself, thinking they found the smoking gun. They found the magic bullet. And now with Cohen saying, hey, Trump knew about that meeting that Donald Jr. had with the Russian honeypot in Trump Tower. Trump is on the warpath claiming he didn't know about it. And he's really letting Cohen have it. And now CNN's forced to say that Cohen doesn't have any evidence for the claim. But the bottom line is it's not even Mueller's case. Now, you might be saying, but could he get it back, Rush? Could he get it back? He'll work with the SDNY, but the point is he gave it away. He's known about Cohen for who knows how long. The special counsel and his 13 witch hunt specialists have known all about this. They've looked into all this and stuff we don't even know about that they've looked into. They didn't just decide that Trump's tweets may hold some gold. They didn't just decide that Michael Cohen may actually have the smoking gun bullet. They long ago concluded that he doesn't. Otherwise, the case wouldn't have been passed off to the Southern District of New York. So that brings us to the economic news of the day. Trump promised it. His economic advisors assured us that it would happen. The drive-by media said it was impossible to happen. It couldn't happen. Trump was deranged to predict that it would happen. Trump was unreasonable. Trump was giving the American people false hope. Hillary Clinton said that this was dangerous. Trump is proving his incompetence by suggesting that we could grow the economy at an annual rate of 4%. And we're going to go back in time here and find various bits of evidence of all these so-called experts claiming it's impossible, couldn't be done, how it was misleading, it was giving people false hope, it was going to end up depressing people, it was very irresponsible for Trump to make this prediction, and yet it was pretty much assured that it was going to happen based simply on Trump's policies, the tax cuts, the deregulation, the freeing up of money, the ability to use it for expansion and growth, wages increasing. I mean, the ideas that we've all believed in to cause the economy to grow work. They worked with Ronaldus Magnus, and they're working with Trump. The left doesn't want anybody to think this stuff works. So now the left, you know what the left's excuse for the GDP being 4% is? Soybeans. Yeah, that's right. It's a one-time thing. It's because Trump sold so many soybeans to the European Union and to the Chicoms. That's all it is. It's unsustainable. The experts are telling us this can't continue. It won't go on. And yet, it can get bigger. It is sustainable, and it can continue to grow. The Democrat Party is going to do everything it can to retard that growth. The Democrat Party is going to do everything it can to slow down this economy for the purposes of their winning elections. Let me take a brief time out. We'll come back. And no, I'm not kidding. The mainstream media, the drive-bys, are saying that the spike in GDP is a one-time spike because of Trump's trade tariffs. They are claiming that the one-time rise, the 4.1% growth in GDP, was caused by, are you ready for this, farmers rushing to sell their soybeans before the tariffs hit the Chicoms. I mean, this is economics malpractice. This is media malpractice, what these people are doing to try to explain this. You know as well as I do why the economy is growing this way. It's policy related. It's all related to putting more money in the private sector and letting people have the freedom to do with it what they will. Innovate, invent, hire, grow. There's no question why this is happening. Now, I realize the millennial population may not know it. They've been taught socialism is a utopia, it's a panacea, even though they've never lived under it, except maybe certain states. But they've never really seen it. To them, it's just a theory that ends up with utopia and all this stuff. So they need to have this explained, why this is sustainable, why this happened. And, of course, I gladly accept that challenge. But I just went to the audio soundbite roster, and I found a couple things here. My buddy Andy McCarthy was on Fox last night making the same point that I just made about Cohen. Question, it was Laura Ingraham last night. What do you make of this latest claim that Cohen says that President Trump knew about the Trump Tower meeting with the Russian honeypot?
I've always thought that if Mueller believed that Cohen was somehow the key to proving a collusion case against Trump, there's no way he lets that case walk to the Southern District of New York. So I'd be surprised if this links up to anything that's serious in the way of collusion, like an espionage conspiracy. It seems to me that the Mueller investigation is winding down to a conclusion.
Yeah, I don't know about that. You know, they keep adding things that supposedly Mueller is just deciding to look into, like the tweets. But Andy has a comment on that too. But look, this is correct. There's no way. If Cohen has any kind of goods on Trump, Mueller doesn't give the case away. Southern District of New York. So the next question, okay, how do you obstruct an investigation with public comments? This is the tweets. I mean, how in the world can tweeting represent obstruction of justice?
The whole thing is preposterous. To have state of mind or criminal state of mind is irrelevant unless you've done something that actually can amount to obstruction. The president cannot obstruct justice by taking lawful actions that are within his constitutional prerogatives, like pardoning people or firing Comey or weighing in on whether somebody should be prosecuted. I understand the style problem, like they don't like the way Trump goes about things, but you still got to kind of like prove the thing that's a crime before you start worrying about what somebody's state of mind was.
Right, and they still don't have that. There has been a crime announced to pursue because it's always been a counterintelligence operation, which is why there isn't going to be an indictment. Now, this next one, I just want to play you for the fun of it. Yesterday afternoon, Shepard Smith on Fox spoke with A.B. Stoddard, who has moved again. She's now over at Real Clear Politics, the associate editor. She's been everywhere. She worked everywhere in that town. And, you know, Shep is all excited. We know that the president was involved in a payout to a former porn star. We know that he's talking to a lawyer. Shep is all excited. Shep really thinks this Cohen stuff is going to amount to something. He's all excited. And A.B. Stoddard has to tell him that Trump voters don't care about any of this.
If Republican voters say that this is fine with them, that it wouldn't have changed their minds, that they heard the Access Hollywood tape in October of 2016 and went ahead and voted for President Trump anyway, then all of this personal conduct is off the table in any future election at the federal level. This general perception that he was paying off girls to sort of get them out of the way and protect his marriage has been really accepted by all of his supporters generally, if you look at the polls, including he's very strong and devoted evangelical Christian base.
They can't believe it. They simply can't. They can't believe it. You know, Shep is looking to A.B. Stoddard to tell him that Trump's going to be had. We're going to get Trump. We're going to get Trump. This is the best chance we've had, the last straw. And she's right. You know, the Access Hollywood video is the baseline. And so far, they haven't had anything go below that. And if you survive that, then all the rest of this is just noise. Trump voters have made it very clear they're not going to let this guy get derailed the way the political system has always been able to derail political enemies of the system, of the deep state or of the establishment. And they keep hoping that some new development is going to cause all of you Trump voters to snap to and to wake up and realize that you should abandon this guy because of his style, his lack of sophistication. But then remember the CNN piece where they think they've figured it out. Because Trump isn't who you all think he is. He's a normal, average guy. You can hear it on the tapes. He's not extreme. He's not wacko. He has very plain-spoken English, very easy to understand. But when he gets on TV, he has to start performing for you Trump idiots, you see. And that's when he starts dumbing himself down. This is what CNN thinks they have figured out by listening to a couple of sentences of Trump on the tape of his fixer or lawyer, Michael Cohen. Back in a moment. Open Line Friday continues. Line Friday, America's real anchorman, Rush Limbaugh, here at the Limbaugh Institute. Second quarter GDP jumped 4.1%. That's the best pace in nearly 4 years. When I saw that, I said, what, 4 years? The Obama GDP never was over 3%. What is this last 4 years? And they claim that the third quarter or second quarter of 2014 saw a GDP of almost 5%. I said, I don't remember that. So I got busy. I went out there and I started looking this up. And sure enough, if you go to the Bureau of Economic Analysis, which is an arm of the Commerce Department, you'll find that right there, it's either Q2 or Q3, second quarter, third quarter of 2014 is a GDP of almost 4%. The next quarter is barely over 1.5%. So what's this? So I started, because I don't remember this. I don't remember that figure even being promoted and bandied about and heralded. And I still can't find what it is that caused that. The closest I can get to it is that it was right in the middle of quantitative easing, where we were printing money left and right and giving it to the stock market for the purchase of equities to keep the illusion that the stock market was going gangbusters, even though Main Street wasn't. And then I remembered that there was a time Obama redefined the calculation of gross domestic product to include something as nebulous as intellectual property. No other capitalist or Western democratic nation includes intellectual property in the calculation of GDP. And then I remembered, and all of this is still kind of fuzzy, and then I remembered that there was also the memory of that quarter was starting to slowly come back as I looked into this. And I remembered that most of it, and this was reported, most of it had to do with the massive growth of government. I just can't remember the specific areas of government, but that massive GDP growth also coincided with a increase in percentage of government spending as a percentage of GDP. The Obama administration did something in the quarter before that with federal spending and quantitative easing, and I just, given enough time, I'll find it. But in truth, folks, we haven't had a genuine 4% gross domestic product or economic activity. We haven't had a legitimate one like this in far longer than 4 years. I mean, it's not even close. The Obama administration, on average, was under 2%. 1.8% was the average GDP all the 8 years of Obama, even if you factor in that one quarter that was like at 4.8%. This is real. Now, I hear what some of you say, well, Rush, are you saying that quarter in 2014 wasn't real? No, it was real, but the way they got it was outside the U.S. private sector economy. It didn't result from economic activity within the private sector. This does. And my friends, it is crucially important that people understand why this happened, because this is a direct response or a direct result of the implementation of policies that had not been implemented in this country in at least 8 years. And that is why this economy is growing by leaps and bounds. Now, the experts are saying this is unsustainable. This was a one-off because of the sale of soybeans. And if you doubt that, grab audio soundbite number 6. I just want you to hear this. We put together a montage of how desperate the drive-bys are not to credit Trump for this.
Soybeans, the magic bean, has moved GDP.
How much of this number was going to be sort of soybeans?
Getting those soybeans out there before any kind of tariffs hit.
Buying by overseas of soybeans ahead of these retaliatory tariffs.
Farmers that grow soybeans had a huge surge in exports, and we're going to see that reverse.
Soybean exports, stockpiling ahead of what many feared would be a trade war.
That trade war is its own element to this. That is also a positive that nobody here apparently knows how to analyze and properly credit and understand. But the idea that these people could mobilize their agricultural sales apparatus quickly enough to beat the imposition of tariffs to cause the economy to grow so rapidly is absurd, folks. So we have a massively growing economy because of soybeans? Why do they insult our intelligence? And some of these people that you just heard are on Fox. Here is what happened. It is not complicated, and this is in itself frustrating. This ought to be as understandable as 2 + 2 is 4. That's how automatic and axiomatic this is. Economics does not have to be confusingly complex. It can be, but this doesn't need to be. We proved this in the 1980s. Ronald Reagan did this exact thing and sustained it for what ended up being 20 years. It's extended all the way through the 90s to the degree that Bill Clinton was able to take credit for it because the media was willing to let him have it since they had done their best to revise history in the 80s and claim that Reagan had nothing to do with this. To review, in 1981, when Reagan takes office, the top marginal tax rate is 70. Actually, it's 90%, but nobody paid that, so it's 70%. Top marginal tax rate, 70%. 8 years later, Reagan leaves office, top marginal tax rate, 28%. We cut taxes 70 to 28% on the marginal dollars. And what happened? The GDP, the economy, grew. It doubled from $500 billion to almost $1 trillion by reducing tax cuts. There were also elements. We got rid of a whole bunch of burdensome regulations. This so frightened the left and the Democrats, they immediately had to start lying about it and revising history and claiming that this did nothing but raise revenue for the rich, that the poor got poorer, the income gap continued to widen. None of it was true. But they kept pummeling it and kept pummeling it for a number of years that it simply became what everybody thought was true. And therefore, whenever the idea of tax cuts surfaced from the Republican Party, here came the media claiming it's just a tax cut for the rich. It's nothing more than a tax cut for the rich. And it became very difficult to do them. What Donald Trump has done is simply reinstitute or reinstate similar policies that happened in the 1980s. And I'm not trying to take anything away from Trump. Quite the contrary. Trump deserves a monumental amount of credit for having the fortitude to do this against all of the opposition, against all the collected media disinformation and propaganda. But the reason I say this is as simple as 2 + 2 = 4 is because it is. You have an economy. A portion of the economy is called the private sector. That's you and me, where we work, what we buy, multiplied by all of the citizens in the country doing that. The other side of it is the government. The government's a certain percentage of our economy as well. The more money that government takes away from the private sector, the smaller the private sector gets. In this situation, it is a zero-sum game. So when the government gets bigger, when the government takes over healthcare, when the healthcare industry was a private sector concern and people were paid by virtue of their work there and profits were made by virtue of decisions there, money was lost by virtue of decisions. But whatever, it was taking place in the United States economy, the private sector. So here comes Obama, as an example, taking it over. He basically stole 1/6 of the U.S. economy, put it under the control of the government. It was called Obamacare. Well, by doing that, just that alone, the economy gets smaller. And there are fewer opportunities for jobs in that economy. More people continue to lose their jobs as the government took over private sector operations. And this was just a one-off. The government's been doing this off and on for years, subsuming parts of the private sector. In addition to all that, these nameless bureaucrats who were unelected, working at all the federal bureaucracies, were writing new regulations on human behavior and what you could and could not do without this permission there, and all of it put an economic strain. It limited the flow of capital. It restrained people spending money on innovative growth ideas, as exactly it was designed to do. So Trump comes into office and decides we're going to change all of this. We're going to get rid of Obamacare. We're going to put health care back in the private sector. We're going to lower these punitive tax rates that rose after Reagan left office, and we're going to lower tax rates, giving people more money. We're going to let people keep more of what they earn, in the belief that people will behave much more wisely with their own money than the government will. Individual citizens working in their own self-interest is far better circumstance than the government trying to deny people opportunity here or there or limiting economic activity. Trump also instituted a massive program to deregulate much of the regulatory infrastructure that had become blocking and punitive and so forth. So by the time the Trump tax cuts were in, this has happened really rapidly too, folks. These tax cuts are not that old. The infusion of capital from government back to the private. That's what happens when you cut taxes. The government loses money, as it should. The government loses money because government no longer has it. You do. You get to keep the dollars that you earn. They're yours. You produced them in the first place. That's what's happening now. But ironically, government does grow. The way government grows is because the economy over here grows. More jobs are created because the economy is booming and employers need more people to do more work. So people get hired, and therefore there are new taxpayers. People are coming off the unemployment rolls at a rapid rate. The number of people who have not been working for a number of years, that's coming down as well. And so all of these people are now paying taxes. So government revenues are growing while the private sector is growing at the same time. And it's because there are more people paying taxes, even though everybody's paying less. This works every time it's tried. It's the same as 2 + 2 = 4. So the economy is growing great guns. More people are working than ever before. Black and Latino unemployment are at record all-time lows. There's literally nothing about this to oppose if you believe in the principle that people should keep the majority of what they earn, and that when that happens, it's good for everybody. It's simple morality and a reorientation of the belief that the U.S. economy hums much better the less it's hampered and the less it's regulated by the federal and state governments. And it's just exactly what's happening here. This 4% GDP is exactly what should happen based on the policies that Trump implemented. Deregulation, which allows capital money to start moving around in creative and innovative ways. People earning more, getting increases, getting bonuses, paying less in taxes, more disposable income, meaning there's more commerce, there's more goods and services that people are accessing and buying. The people who sell those goods and services are doing better because people are buying their products and services. It's a self-feeding growth formula, and it works every time it's tried. There's nothing accidental. There's nothing coincidental here, and there's nothing really magic. It's just plain old 2 + 2 is 4 common sense. What you need to know is the Democrat Party's hell-bent on stopping it. The Democrat Party is hell-bent on you believing that something here is wrong and it's really only the rich that are benefiting and you're getting screwed no matter what your paycheck looks like. And no matter how happy you are, no matter what your content level is, you are getting screwed. The experts are now saying, we can't sustain 4% economic growth. This is not possible. It's not possible to get this. This has to be because of soybeans. But at the same time, they're saying this is unsustainable. They're very worried about the next report. The next report on gross domestic product is due 11 days before the November elections. And they are going to be biting their nails and sweating bullets, waiting the next GDP report. Because it can go higher. It can hit 5. It can hit 6%. This is entirely possible. This is the United States of America. There's no doubt it can hit 6%. If the current policies remain in play and are not reversed or rolled back like the Democrats are promising to do. Elizabeth Warren and her buddies promising to raise your taxes back up to 50% if they get elected. Some of these, I love the opportunity to demonstrate my expertise outside of politics. See, this is why I'm always asking questions that have nothing to do with all this. I'm eager for them. And we got a bunch of them coming up. So, first we'll start with John in Denver. He's not outside the area of politics. Don't misunderstand. John, welcome. Great to have you on the program. How you doing?
Hi, Rush. As a federal agent, I'm getting really hacked off the more I read of this Greg Jarrett book. And the reason why is we're living this chicanery that happened up to the election and past and beyond it. It is impeding our ability to do our job. In 2 cases in point, we now have an email retention policy that keeps our emails for the next 20 years. Think about that. You wrote an email today. 20 years from now, it's viewed in the context of 2038, and how your language today would be interpreted even more politically correct times then. And then on top of that, every time as a result of that, every time I construct an email to my manager, it takes me 15 minutes to write 2 flippin' sentences because I am sitting there with that in the back of my mind. And as
wait. Hang on just a second. Let's jump back a minute. You're a federal agent. You're reading the Greg Jarrett book, and the timeline of the investigations is really ticking you off. Why? What about the timeline?
Well, as you see, initially it's with the emails that were related to a former presidential candidate, okay? And I've seen the progression of the regulations that kind of couch in our job or box in our job, tighten as a result of that. And I've just gotten about a quarter of the way through the book, and I just almost wanted to throw my computer across the room just because of the frustration that we experience on a daily basis. So it impedes our ability, looking at that, we live it out every day. It impedes our ability because we rely upon the individuals that we interview in the course of working our cases to be open and honest. And how can they be? If they're sitting there looking at evidence like this, looking at this book and the other book that you mentioned a few weeks back, and realizing what they're saying could be construed one day as perjury.
I finally see what you're getting at. It took now, and sadly, I'm out of time. I got to go, but I got it now. Sorry. Headlines from the New York Times: Why Friday's GDP number may be a size too big. And Europe averts a trade war with Trump, but can Europe trust Trump? Now, you compare similar headlines when the Obama administration had similar stories to tell, rarely, and it's a totally different. Folks, you remember the story that we have had about the banning of plastic straws in California and so forth, the imprisonment, 6 months in jail, maybe $1,000 fine, unless, of course, you're an illegal immigrant using a plastic straw to shoot spitballs at ICE agents. Wait till you hear where they got the data on how many straws are being used in order to ban them.
And now, from sunny South Florida, it's Open Line Friday.
From a 9-year-old punk kid. A 9-year-old kid. By the way, have you seen these scary environmentalist wacko stories about all of the plastic that's in our oceans? And it's killing all the fish, and it's killing all the whales, and it's polluting the planet so much that aliens might not want to come. Have you seen those stories? Yeah, there's supposedly this giant plastic junkyard in the Pacific Ocean way out there northwest of Seattle and Portland. Well, guess what? 90% of the plastic in the oceans today comes from the Chicoms. I kid you not. The data is there. The Chinese pollute the oceans with plastic. Almost, it's as close to 90% of it. The United States contribution to plastic pollution in the world is 2%. In the oceans is 2%. Now, you might be saying, well, how can that be? We're the biggest economy. We're bigger than the China. Yeah, but we clean up our messes better than anybody in the world, folks. That's part and parcel of capitalism. That's part of it's the pride of ownership. If you want to get right down to it, when you own something, when you've worked hard to own it, you take care of it. If it's given to you, it's not nearly the same to you. It just isn't. This is human nature. If you have no direct tie to any of it, if it's not yours, then it becomes easy to, well, the next guy will clean it up or whatever. But it's undeniable. The United States, we have far more economic output than any nation on earth. And compared to all those other nations, like the Chinese or like Russia, we have the cleanest air. We have the cleanest waters. We have less pollution, and we're making great strides in it each and every year. And it's not because of environmentalist wackos. It's because of capitalism. It's because of having the wherewithal to clean up our messes. Anyway, this silly stuff about plastic straws and how they are damaging the ecosystem to the point that aliens might not even want to land here because of it. The popular statistic that claims 500 million plastic straws are used in America every day. 500 million plastic straws. Now, the population of the country is a little over, 290, 300 million, somewhere around there. And I don't know about you, but I do not use plastic straws. Somebody, therefore, is using my share. The statistics about how much sugar per capita is, I don't eat much sugar, so some of you people eating my share of sugar. I mean, if this is to be true. And how much beer is consumed. I don't drink beer, but whatever the per capita consumption of beer, some of you people are drinking my share of beer because I don't do all that. I don't use plastic straws. I don't use plastic mixers. You know why? You know why? Because I'm lazy. You can ask the people here. You know how we brew coffee for me here? We open the sweetener, whatever we choose to use, and we put it in the bottom of the pot before it brews. And then the water goes through the coffee basket and it brews and it accumulates in there. And after it's over, we shake the pot, bammo. And then I've got a whole pot of sweetened coffee. I don't have to waste time sweetening every cup. It's about efficiency. This is capitalism on the march. This is creativity. This is innovation. I do the same thing at home. I never stir anything because I don't have to. Everything that gets to my mouth is pre-stirred, pre-mixed. I take care of it, and all of it happens without the use of straws. I don't even use spoons to stir things because I don't need to. If I'm at a restaurant and somebody says, would you like some coffee? Room service. They always bring the coffee in. May I pour you a cup, sir? I run to the, no, I'll do it. They back off, and they say, why? Because I put the sweetener in first so I don't have to stir it. That way you don't have a dirty spoon to clean. That way there's not a plastic straw to throw away, and I don't have to waste time stirring it. Look at all the time that's been saved here with my creativity. And all of that is born about it's not lazy. It just, if I'm in here working, I don't want to have to take the time to stir a cup of coffee. Just pour it pre-sweetened and be done with it. I mean, how many of you go out and buy Diet Coke or Diet soft drinks are pre-sweetened? You pour them in the glass, drink them, stir them up, right? Why shouldn't it be that way with everything? At any rate, 500 million straws per day, supposedly. And it was created, this formula to arrive at this number, created by a fourth grader, a 9-year-old in 2011. Quote, that figure has been cited widely, appearing in stories by USA Today, CNN, the Washington Post, the Wall Street Journal, Fox News, and yes, even the New York Times. But consider the source. The number is based on research conducted years ago by an enterprising 9-year-old Vermont boy named Milo Kress. So we have a 9-year-old named Milo Kress 7 years ago concocting a formula that has now been automatically accepted and believed to the point that in California you might face jail time if you dispense a plastic straw. If you're a waiter and you dispense a plastic straw to somebody to use, you could face jail time and perhaps a $1,000 fine. Milo Kress, who was in fourth grade at the time, had no access to other statistics. He based his claim on comments from plastic straw makers. He called them up. He's now 17. He said, it's a little surprising. I came up with a statistic because I couldn't find anything else about it. If there are other stats on how many straws we use that are based on more rigorous research than the research I did, I'm happy to embrace those. Now, the statistic created by then 9-year-old Milo Kress has led to an environmental movement to ban plastic straws. Seattle became the first major U.S. city to do it. San Francisco joined in. Starbucks has embraced the cause by announcing it would phase out plastic straws. The New York Times story, how a 9-year-old boy's statistics shaped a debate on straws. Now, there is no formula. The guy just called them up. He called up the straw makers and said, how many of these things do you make? Nobody knows how many are thrown away. We know how many are manufactured, but nobody knows how many are used. It was just guesstimate. But look how quickly and how eagerly this quote-unquote research was glommed onto. And it happens to coincide with the reporting of this gigantic plastic junkyard out in the northern Pacific. And, of course, part and parcel of this is the United States is largely to blame. Mr. Kress, 9-year-old Milo Kress, lived in Burlington, Vermont. He had access to no research data when he developed his estimate in 2011. He started a movement called Be Straw Free, a campaign to persuade restaurants to offer straws optionally rather than automatically. After failing to find reliable stats online about straw usage, he decided to call the straw manufacturers. Okay, well, there you go. And that's why all this is happening. Now you might say, well, why is all this? Because the environmentalist wackos were eager to accept anything that seemed outrageously excessive that could easily be blamed on the United States' evil consumption, and then ultimate pollution, and then ultimate destruction. As part of the GDP story, I mentioned that if you go back in time, when there was, and it was not very often, but when there was positive economic news to report about the Obama administration, far different than what we're seeing today with Trump. For example, consumers' soybeans fuel U.S. second quarter growth. Another story, why Friday's GDP number may be a size too big. Experts in Europe avert a trade war, but can they trust him? There's one story here. Breitbart report Chinese are awed by Trump's skill as a strategist and a tactician. But here, the U.S. GDP, I have a story, Forbes, October 23rd, 2014. This would be smack dab, middle of second term of Obama. U.S. GDP grew 3.5%, third quarter 2014. Now, wait just a minute. Wait just a minute. This is the quarter that is reported to have grown near 5. That's right. It was revised down a couple of months later. That's what I had forgotten. It never was near 5%. They revised it down. U.S. GDP grew 3.5%, third quarter 2014. And the headline of the story, very supportive of Obama, very optimistic of what this means for the future of the U.S. economy. Everybody very, very happy about it in the drive-by media. Here's the New York Times headline, same story, third quarter GDP rose 3.5%, lifting hopes for U.S. economy. See the difference? Here we have 4.1% economic growth, and experts say it's a point too high. Experts say it's not sustainable. Experts say it's all due to soybeans. It's a one-off. Experts say, yeah, they had a trade deal with the Europeans, but can the Europeans trust Trump? On Thursday, the boosters won at least a temporary victory with a government report that estimated the nation's economic output rose at a healthy 3.5% annual rate in the third quarter. That's October 30th, 2014, New York Times. Just to point the difference. Here's another one. This is the New York Times today. U.S. economy continues its surge, growing at a 4.1% rate in the last quarter. Many experts expect a slowdown later this year. Next headline, New York Times. GDP grew at 4.1% rate in U.S. in last quarter with some asterisks, meaning it's not real. So exactly as expected, the media reporting the number and then trying to tell people it's not real, that it's artificial, or that it is unsustainable. Here is, let's see, not a story about tariffs, it's a different one. So you see the variance here in the way this is being reported back in 2014. all excited, all happy. People should feel good about it today. It isn't real. Don't count on it. Can't be sustained. It's a little bit top heavy. Don't really believe it. And, of course, if it's in the New York Times, and that's going to be the flavor of reporting elsewhere throughout the country, the AP, CNN, and other places, when in fact it makes absolutely perfect sense related to the policies that Trump has implemented. Brief time out. I want to come back and go back to the phones, which we'll do before you know it. Don't go. The upshot of it is on the kid Milo Kress. He formed up an environmentalist wacko group trying to verify the statistic that 500 million straws are thrown away every day in the United States, and they have been unable to get even close to verifying the number. The outfit that he joined was some bunch called EcoCycle, and they have tried to verify the statistic, but the searches that they've used, the data they've tried to input, they've turned up nothing. I said, well, what we've gotten is very frustrated. The communications, it's a nonprofit, by the way. It's trying to find out if the stat's true. They can't verify it. There's no way to verify it. Yet here go the environmentalist wackos making law on it. Law for which you can be fined and maybe even be sent to jail. Even though this wild-ass number can't even be verified. It cannot be confirmed. It can't be proved. They can't even get close to it. It's just a number pulled out of the air. To the phones, we return to Irmo, South Carolina. John, you're next. It's great to have you, sir. Hi.
Well, I guess this makes me the most listened to radio talk show caller in America.
It does indeed. Exactly right. This is your big showbiz break.
What an honor. Well, I've been thinking about something, Rush. You talk about cigars from time to time.
Yes.
And I've been a cigar smoker for 20 plus years. I'm in my 40s. I started as soon as I could. And I remember in the 1990s, one of the biggest ring gauge cigars you could get was a Diamond Crown, and it was a whopping 54 ring gauge.
Right. Wait just a second. We need to bring the audience in on this.
Yes, sir.
They may not know what ring gauge is. It's simply the circumference of the cigar.
Correct.
47, 54 centimeters is what we're talking about here, and they call it ring gauge because it would be the equivalent of a ring size. So it's the thickness of the cigar that we're talking about. If 54 is thick, that requires a pretty open mouth to smoke. And you're right. Back then, Diamond Crown 54 ring gauge was pretty much it, but that's been exceeded a lot by now.
Well, that's my point, that even if you look at articles, I was paying attention back then in the 2000s, the cigar industry called that cigar kind of a blip on the radar, that these large cigars will never hang around. And here we've been through the 2000, 2010 to today, and it went from 60 ring gauge to 70 ring gauge. I can get cigars from almost any maker, almost 80 ring gauge. So it's always not a blip in the industry. I'm just wondering if you ever thought, one, do you smoke those ring size gauge cigars, and what do you think is the trend? Why was it not a blip, and why is it continuing to get bigger and not stabilize or go back to smaller size?
Well, the reason why, I remember when they thought it was just a blip is because it was so vastly outsized the norm. The standard ring gauge, your average ordinary cigar smoker, the standard ring gauge was anywhere between 32 to 47. And 47 at one time was considered jumbo. That's the size of a Churchill. You get a double Corona size, you're looking at a 49 ring gauge. I happen to love big ring gauge cigars because I don't like these thin little things that make you feel like you're drinking soup. If you're going to smoke a cigar. You need to put it in your mouth. You need to be substantial. The bigger ring gauge, the better. I agree. But they're really hard to make. They are extremely hard to make quality. You start rolling a cigar that thick, maintaining a proper draw and avoiding plugs. It takes somebody that really knows what they're doing. And I think that's why they thought that it was only going to be a blip, because I don't think they thought at the time that they'd be able to mass produce enough of them to satisfy the kind of demand that existed. But obviously that was incorrect. People liked them.
I remember if you were smoking a 54 ring gauge cigar back in the 90s, you kind of looked like an idiot. That was almost too big for the standard then, and you really stood out, and people kind of pointed at you.
Well, that's not for me. I have a big mouth, and so the big ring gauge was not at all a foolish-looking thing. But none of that matters. It shouldn't matter what you look like or what you think other people. Do you like them? Do you like big ring gauge? You obviously do.
So Asylum 80 ring gauge is one of my favorites right now.
Well, what size is that?
It's a 6-inch by 80 ring gauge.
6-inch by 80. Oh, see,
80.
you're well, then your mouth, your mouth is wide open the whole time that cigar's in it. But it's a maximized way of getting the flavor out of the cigar. I think if you like it, stick with it. Don't worry about what you look like or what other people think of it, because none of that matters. The New York Times and the Associated Press have been unable to find out anything disqualifying about Brett Kavanaugh, Trump's choice to replace Anthony Kennedy on the United States Supreme Court. Now, this is not a story about how not a single Democrat will sit down and talk to him. That is true. Not a single Democrat so far has agreed to sit down and have a conversation with Brett Kavanaugh. Now, this is tradition. President names a nominee. There's always a senator appointed to shepherd the nominee through the meeting the senators process. And the nominee is escorted to various senators' offices where they sit down and chat, which is basically the senator telling the nominee what he better not do if he wants his vote. The nominee says, yes, sir, 3 bags full. I respect you, Senator. You're wonderful. Then he goes on to the next senator and repeat process. The Democrats are refusing to meet with Kavanaugh. And the reason they're refusing to meet with Kavanaugh is because they must demonstrate to their lunatic fringe base resistance. This news was not supposed to leak out, but it has, and of course it doesn't look good for these people. It makes them look closed-minded, not open to the process. But they can't find anything on Kavanaugh himself, despite the million pages, despite the hundreds of thousands of pages of written material. They can't find anything disqualifying. So, Manchin has met. Okay, I stand corrected. Oh, he's going to meet. Manchin is going to meet with. So I'm technically correct. No Democrat has yet met with Kavanaugh. Okay, so then don't correct me. I'm right sitting here today. If I'd have said this on Monday, I'd be wrong. But I'm not wrong. I'm right. Manchin is going to meet with him on Monday, unless they get to Manchin. No, so what the New York Times and the AP are doing is targeting Kavanaugh's wife. The New York Times and the Associated Press are going after Brett Kavanaugh by targeting his wife. They are going to try to learn more about her political views. The NTK network obtained documents that showed that the New York Times and the AP each have made requests under the Maryland Public Information Act, the PIA. It's the Maryland version of the FOIA. Seeking emails that Ashley Kavanaugh, the wife of Brett Kavanaugh, sent as town manager of the village of Chevy Chase. She was a town manager of the village of Chevy Chase, Maryland, Section 5. They now want any and all emails she wrote. The documents show that the AP requested all emails sent or received by Ashley Kavanaugh's village of Chevy Chase email address. The New York Times only requested emails that contain certain key words, including liberal, abortion, gay, and gun. I kid you not, these people are walking stereotypical cliches. The New York Times has requested any and all emails from Kavanaugh's wife when she was a town manager of Village of Chevy Chase containing the words liberal, abortion, gay, and gun. Now, this is just flat out disgusting, and it's precedent setting. Do you think they went after the partner of Sotomayor? Did they go after Stephen Breyer's wife? Did they go after the husband of Ruth Buzzy Ginsburg? No way. And if the Republicans had done that, can you imagine? There's just no other way to describe this but purely disgusting. It is disgusting and desperate because they don't have anything on the nominee. So it's obviously what they're going to try to do here. They're going to try to find emails where this woman has a view of abortion that the New York Times would disagree with, or gay, or gun, and then they're going to try to say, they're going to ask Kavanaugh, we have discovered that your wife is very much against abortion, very much against Planned Parenthood. Do you agree with her? Now, they know he's not going to answer. That's not the purpose. The purpose here is to create an illusion. This is an offshoot of the old Democrat adage that the evidence is irrelevant. It's the seriousness of the charge that matters. So what they obviously want to do is try to find information that will allow them to make the charge that Kavanaugh's family is anti-gay, anti-abortion, because they found it in his wife's emails. They know he'll never answer questions and he won't have to. They don't care. They want to be able to write the story. They're looking for anything that might make Susan Collins and Lisa Murkowski to change their thinking on Kavanaugh. That's what they're trying to do. This whole thing is targeting, well, actually more than that, because there are at least 3 red state senators that as of now it is thought will vote for Kavanaugh. Have you ever heard of anything as disgusting as this? You know, I try to think of things when I see stories like this. Well, let's not do it that way. Let's stick with the Kavanaughs. Can you imagine her? Her husband's been nominated. They know going in what that means for him. But now all of a sudden, her past, her life is going to be turned upside down. Yeah, figure she signed up for it. Figure she knew it. But folks, I'm telling you, behind closed doors, it's never as copacetic and peaceful as you think it might be. You think people in this sphere of life are used to this and are prepared for it, and it rolls off their back because it's just the rules of the game. But I'm telling you, it's not that way. It doesn't happen that way. This is designed to cause acrimony between Kavanaugh and his wife. It's designed to cause and put pressure points and stress. It's designed to make her not want any part of this. It's designed to make her get mad at him. Look what you've dragged me into. I didn't sign up for this when we got married. It's none of their business what I did here and what I've written in my emails. Then he has to talk her down. If this happens, this is what they're trying to create. I'm not predicting that this is the result within their marriage. I'm just telling you this is what the drive-bys are trying to create here. They're all about dividing people. They're all about driving wedges between people, including married couples. But this is how desperate they are. I'm telling you, when news of this gets out, you can throw this on the pile of stuff that's going to end up backfiring on these people like they can't even imagine. They think they're off in a new area. This is a brilliant tack, they're probably thinking. We can't find any dirt on Kavanaugh, but his wife certainly's got some information we can use to sully both of them. They have no idea how it's going to backfire. You just wait. In the meantime, Brian in Knoxville, Tennessee, you're next as we head back to the phones. Hi.
Hi, Rush. Thank you for taking my call.
Yes, sir.
I was just thinking about the Democrats and the Russians and how they go from hilarious to disingenuous. Because I was telling Bo, is the name Whittaker Chambers ringing any bells?
Whittaker Chambers, absolutely.
Yeah, he was a Soviet spy who defected, and he told the Roosevelt administration how many Soviet spies were actually infiltrated his government, and they told him to take a flying leap. And, of course, Alger Hiss. And it's widely believed that Stalin knew about the bomb before Truman did. And you go into the 50s, one of the most vilified men was Joe McCarthy.
Right.
And Richard Nixon and J. Edgar Hoover, people who stood up to the communists and opposed this. And then you go into the 80s, of course, Ronald Reagan, and then fast forward into the 21st century. Sarah Palin was widely mocked for saying the Russians were going to invade Georgia, and they did precisely that. And of course, Mitt Romney was mocked by Obama, saying that, oh, well, the Russians were biggest geopolitical opponent. And then, of course, he says, oh, yeah, the 1980s called and they want their foreign policy back. I mean, it's just, and then, of course, you can even go back even further where, Truman lost China and how much the administrations were so rife with communist and Russian infiltration. So for the Democrats, I say, well, welcome to the party. You're about 80 years too late.
So sounds like your basic conclusion here is that when you synthesize all that, you sift through it, and you take away everything that's extraneous, what you're left with is a single common thing, and that is anytime any public figure goes against communism or the left, they are targeted for destruction. That it's all about targeting the left and communism.
Well, precisely, yeah. If you oppose it, with the exception of World War II, the only time that the media was more or less on our side is because so were the Russians, and that was just a shotgun marriage that was created by Hitler. Because other than that, we were geopolitically opposed, but, all of a sudden, through, him declaring war on the United States and Germany already at war with Russia, then, poof, instant shotgun marriage. And more to the point, if you think about it.
What do you mean the Democrats are 80 years late to the party?
Well, they've been having the Russian infiltration of our administrations and our government has been going on since the Roosevelt administration, probably even before. And they just did everything but, they've always pushed it aside. They've always, vilified the people pointing it out.
Yeah, but they didn't,
for example.
They didn't push it aside. They were trying to protect it.
Well, yeah, that being the point. But now all of a sudden, they're saying they're taking a totally 180 switch because now they can try to, put this on Trump. And it's like now all of a sudden the Russians are the big, the scary thing that all that, that's what I was getting at. Now all of a sudden they flipped 180 degrees on this with regards to Russia. So like I said, it's hilarious and disingenuous at the same time.
Well, that is true. That is true throughout all of our lives, ladies and gentlemen. Trust me on this. For those of you who are young or maybe were not paying very close attention to this kind of stuff as you were growing up and becoming adults, but the Soviet Union has been attempting to infiltrate the culture, the education, the government of the United States for decades. And this is not arguable. It's understood. It's acknowledged. It's well known by everybody. What is argued is about is how successful they were. If you try to make the point that they've really succeeded, and that's when the left is going to start mocking you and laughing at you and claiming you see a communist behind every rock and that you're a wacko and a nutcase, you're a conspiracy kook and all that. The fact of the matter is the Soviet Union has been communism, wherever it is, the Chi-Com communism, Soviet communism, wherever, has always been attempting to infiltrate the U.S. We're the enemy. We stand in the way of communism world domination, which is something they seek. Communism does impose itself on people. Nobody would readily, openly embrace it. It has to be imposed, and then those countries have to build walls to keep people in, because it's not too long that they want to live. So the Democrats, throughout all of this, throughout my entire lifetime, the Democrat Party has been sympathetic to Soviet communism. Most recent example that's glaring is Ronald Reagan. Ronald Reagan was considered to be the danger in the world, the cowboy who was unserious, finger too close to the nuke button. We couldn't put up with it. The Soviet leaders were the ones who were responsible. The Soviet leaders, from Andropov to Brezhnev to Gorbachev, were all the saviors. They were the ones that were going to moderate and tame Reagan. Those are the people we had to mollify and make sure we didn't make mad. That's why Senator Kennedy is writing letters to Soviet leaders begging them to ignore Reagan, that the Democrats will take care of him at the next election. That happened. The Democrats helped the Soviet Union establish a client base in Nicaragua. They did everything they could to avoid and obstruct the Reagan administration's efforts to stop that client state being established and constructed. When you call them out on that, they, of course, they got mad, accused you of lying about them, but it's what they were doing. Now the point, all of a sudden they hate Russia. Now all of a sudden, you hate Russia. Putin's a bad guy. Trump's a bad guy. Putin's a bad guy. And what? About the only thing you could say about this is that Putin today is not specifically directly associated with communism. And Russia is no longer the Soviet Union. And so in the public perception of things, Russia isn't communist anymore. It's perceived that communism fell with the Berlin Wall. And that what Putin is doing, he's just a dictatorial strongman who's a mean ogre and so forth. Your point is well taken, however. Again, I'm looking at the clock. I've got to stop. Wish I didn't have to, but the programming format is such that I do. Back in a moment. Thanks for the call. Reminder from our old buddy Seton Motley. Remember when we learned that F. Chuck Todd's wife worked on the Bernie campaign? Remember that? Well, what were we told about F. Chuck Todd's wife working on the Bernie campaign? There's nothing to see there. Come on. She doesn't have anything to do with the way Chuck does his job. You know, Chuck does his, and this is what Chuck said. Chuck said, my wife's job is independent of mine. The fact that she works with Bernie Sanders has nothing to do with the way I do my job at NBC. And I'm offended that you would try to link my wife to my job. The two have nothing in common. And yet here we are trying to find out dirt on Brett Kavanaugh's wife to link her to him. It's just disgusting. People are just disgusting on a daily basis. Shauna in Denver, you're next. It's great to have you on Open Line Friday.
Thank you, Rush.
You bet.
So I have a comment. I just want to say how wonderful it is to get to talk to you. I have a comment and a question. I didn't tell Mr. Snerdley that. I hope he doesn't get upset with me.
Go ahead.
But yeah, I mean, it's just wonderful to talk. It's, you know, once in a lifetime that somebody gets to talk to the sanity and reasoning and, you know, great.
I understand. Do you realize I have? You realize, Shauna, I have nobody to talk to like you have the chance to talk to me. I got nobody. I have to do all of this alone. I can talk to Catherine about it, but that's it. I can't call somebody like you can call me. I'm it.
Well, but your brain works so well. Do you really need anybody to talk to? No, I'm sure. I know that all of us need somebody to talk to, but.
No, I don't. I'm perfectly satisfied answering my own questions. But I understand that's not to be critical of what you're doing. I'm very flattered.
Oh, yeah, I know. So my comment is, so I think I was watching Tucker last night, and they had the person go out into Ocasio-Cortez's neighborhood, you know, asking them questions about where they thought all the money was going to come from. And my question is, why don't they send somebody out to ask these people why, or, you know, why they think that the white Trump voting deplorables should pay for everything they want? Why should the money come?
They don't look at it that way. It's a great question. They don't see it that way. I'm glad you got that question asked. I'll answer this right when the next hour starts.
More mind bug.
Okay, have to take a brief break at the top of the hour. The answer to her question is they don't look at it as you paying anything that they get. They don't see it that way. They think it's coming from the government. They don't see the government getting its money from you. Do not doubt me. Welcome back. Lots to do, folks. Rush Limbaugh, EIB Network, Friday. Let's just keep rolling.
From sunny South Florida, it's Open Line Friday.
Last hour, the busy broadcast week is upon us. 800-282-2882. Email address lrushbo, eibnet.us. CNN will not let go of the Cohen story. Trying to establish that Trump is lying when he said that he didn't know about the meeting before it happened. They're trying to create timelines. The point about this is they're barking up a tree that doesn't go anywhere. Robert Mueller doesn't even have the Cohen case. He passed it off to the Southern District of New York. The New York Times even says that Cohen has no evidence to back up his assertion that Trump knew of the Trump Tower meeting with the Russian honeypot before it happened. So I'm going to double back to that because F. Chuck Todd is out there saying the economy is not the news today. The GDP is not the news today. The Cohen revelations are the story today. Let them keep going, folks. I'm telling you, all of this is just cementing Trump supporters more tightly with him, and it's I think causing some independents to head to Trump. But there's also something else happening out there, and I've been making this point that it is the Democrats and the American left who have tarnished the reputation of the American electoral system. It is they who have degraded it, not Putin. It is they who have created doubts about it. It is the Democrat Party and the American left which has done more damage to the perceived honesty and integrity of our electoral system than anything Vladimir Putin could dream of doing, and we now have evidence, not that we need it, that I'm right. A poll just out, a majority of Democrats believe that it is either definitely true or probably true that Russia tampered with vote tallies in order to get Trump elected. This is a YouGov Economist survey. This is a reputable survey. This is not some fly-by-night outfit. 55% of Democrats believe the Russians tampered with the votes. Didn't happen. Isn't possible. Even Rod Rosen, is it Stein or Steen? You told me yesterday, and I can't remember what the correct pronunciation is. Rod Rosenstein? Even Rosenstein a week ago, when they announced the indictment of the 12 Russians that were supposedly meddling, Rosenstein made it a point to say that nothing in the indictment suggests that a single vote was changed or that a single election result was altered by virtue of what the defendants are alleged to have done. After all of this, they have to admit not a single vote was tampered with. And yet, look, 55% of Democrats think the Russians tampered with votes. What does that ultimately mean? That means that they have succeeded in tarnishing the integrity and the reputation, if you will, of the American electoral system. The Democrat Party has done this. The United States mainstream media has done this. Not Russia, not Putin, not Gustafer 2.0. None of these so-called Russian troll farms had anything to do with this. This is directly attributable to the Democrat Party. And now every election going forward that they lose, the Democrat base is going to believe that the Russians or some nefarious outsider tampered with the votes. Folks, this is unconscionable. I know we have freedom of speech in this country, and it specifically applies to political speech, and there's no recourse here, but that's why responsibility and integrity are called for. This is the epitome of disgusting irresponsibility. All because the Democrats couldn't win an election they thought they were going to win in a landslide. All because the media could not influence enough of you to vote against Donald Trump. So now they have to blow up the whole system. This is exactly why I predict that at some point down the road in the long-term future, somebody on the Democrat side is going to openly say elections are the problem. They're setting it up now. Elections are forever tainted. What's the next step? If you've got 55% of brain-dead Democrats believing that Russians tampered with the votes and that's why Hillary lost, then how far is the next step to these elections have been so corrupted, we have got to change it. We've got to cancel them. We've got to do something else. Do not doubt me. And this is not something that's spontaneous. They've been working on this since the Florida recount in 2000, Bush versus Gore. And then when they started claiming that the exit polls were more accurate than actual tallied votes in 2004 when Horseface lost. Second term George W. Bush, John Kerry, who served in Vietnam when he lost. But now they've done it. They have tarnished. How can the Democrats ever think that another election that they lose was legitimate. They can't now when 55% think the Russians tampered with enough votes for Trump to win. This is, to me, this is huge. This is monumentally bad. This is not insignificant. This is not something that's just incidental to the fog of political war. When you go this far to create this kind of doubt in these many people's minds about the legitimacy of national elections, you couldn't. It would be impossible. Even their superstar hero, Barack Hussein Obama, told them it couldn't be done. But it doesn't matter. There has been so much irresponsible lying and suggesting and well, it's just flat out lying about what happened in this last election. 55% of Democrats now think, I'm telling you, how do these people ever think another election that they lose was legit? Of course, if they win, it still may be legit, but that they were able to overcome it. I wouldn't be surprised even if they win, they still question the validity of the election. They could have won even bigger, they will say, if the whoever's hadn't tampered. Like, let's say they don't win enough votes to take over the House, but they win enough to make them really think they've had a good day. We could have won the House, except the Russians tampered. The Republicans worked with the Russians to screw us in Ocasio-Cortez district or whatever. This stuff has no end to it. Speaking of Ocasio-Cortez, we had our last caller who was referring to Tucker Carlson, playing an audio and video going out into the district of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, asking her voters about socialism and so forth. We've actually got the audio of this here. And what this is Cabot Phillips campus reform in the district of Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez in Astoria, that's in Queens. And they're asking several of her constituents about socialism. And he says, what do you think the government should be subsidizing? Her platform, Cortez platform, includes free health care, free college tuition, a minimum living wage, and housing as a human right. Are those things that you think the government should be providing for people?
Absolutely. I feel like everyone should have free education and health care.
How are we going to pay for those?
Oh, God. I mean...
Us.
Us, I guess. Yeah.
Who, in your mind, should pay for all of the free things?
All of the free things? Well, some of it should come from taxes, but the government should pay for it.
But the government is funded by taxes.
Yeah.
I don't know where the money would come from, but they can figure it out.
Tax corporations, let's tax the 1% and find a way to support a living wage.
I'm liberal. I don't know exactly where I stand, but I know democratic socialist is better than conservative. It's just better than, it's the better option.
Okay, now I can understand if you're watching that you might lose hope in the future of your country, at least the future of Queens. Well, I'm liberal, and I don't know exactly where I stand, but I know Democrat socialism better than conservative. That's the only comment in this bite that you really need to pay any attention to. That's what they have done. This woman, this student, doesn't even know what conservative is. She thinks that she does. She thinks it's mean-spirited extremism, conspiracy theories, racism, bigotry, homophobia. That's what she thinks it is. She hasn't been taught to question anything. The next interesting bite here, well, the government should pay for it. Now, some of these respondents tax corporations, make the corporations pay, but in the end of every thought here is the government should pay for it. And I will venture the idea that many of these respondents here really don't make the connection that their neighbors are going to be paying for what they want. They think their neighbors are going to be getting all this stuff free. They don't think their neighbors are going to pay for it, and they don't think they're going to pay for it. They think the government is going to pay for it. Now, I know you're saying, come on, Rush. They have to know that the government doesn't have any money before tax. No, they don't know that, folks. No, they don't. Their view of government, what they've been taught of government, government is God. Government has everything. Government never runs out of anything. Government can give anybody whatever it wants. It's just when Republicans run government, it's a bunch of stingy creeps that want people to suffer. When the Democrats run government, that's when the government does what it should do, gives everybody as much as it can. That's when they're Santa Claus. When the Republicans are in charge, that's when they keep the money for themselves and their corporate friends, and they're stingy and they don't give the people anything. This is what they think. They don't have, most of these people, there's exceptions to this, obviously, most of these people have the foggiest idea that it is their fellow citizens that will be paying for all this. Now, I happen to think that if they knew that, it wouldn't change their thinking. They would just say, well, yeah, all these people have got more money than I do. They should be paying for all of this. It's been taught for as long as I've been alive that government is heaven, that government is God, that government's benevolent, that government is the solution, government's the answer. Even though every problem they've got in life is the result of government screwing something up. The healthcare system's screwed up because of government. Social Security and pensions are screwed up because of government. Pretty much everything making them happy, unhappy. Education, screwed up by the government. And even at that, even though government screwed it up, which they probably wouldn't agree to, they want government to fix it. Despite evidence that government doesn't fix anything. You who are young and just becoming aware of this, I know you're frustrated. Try 30 years of this stuff and being unable to break through to college-age kids. I mean, that's frustrating. And actually, we have broken through to quite a few college-age kids. By that, I mean the current conservative movement. But it's still, it's dramatic what we are up against here. Because we're up against genuine ignorance. Educated people who think they're educated. They got a college degree or they're in the process of getting one. They're on campus. They're going to class or being taught by professors. They think they're smart. They think they know everything worth knowing. And they've been taught all the prejudices. They've been taught all the bigotry. They've absorbed it. They know how to repeat it and spout it back at people. The one thing they haven't been taught to do is think. Curiosity has been erased right out of their minds. Critical thinking has been criticized. Any variance from what's being taught, any variance from the appointed belief system is attacked and ridiculed and mocked. And so there we are. It's a tough thing to confront this kind of stupidity. You know what? This is another good example. These kinds of sound bites, these kinds of interviews of people, I mean, they've been done for 35 years, 30 years. And it's this kind of stuff. We played examples of this back in 1989, 90, 91, and we would air it and we would laugh at it. We would have the best time with this. We would make fun of it, laugh at it, because there's no way these people could really believe that. Yet here we are 30 years later, and we're 2 generations now believe it. 2 succeeding additional generations. And this is just the tip of the iceberg. Where you get questions about women's studies, where you get questions about guns and so forth. You throw that into the mix of this stuff here. So the reaction has always been, let them outgrow it. Just let them go through it. There's no changing their minds. But a lot of them don't outgrow it. They didn't outgrow it in the 60s. And now many of them, like Bill Clinton and Hillary, those are products of the 60s. And look at them. Obama wishes he had been alive and of age in the 60s. I got to take a break. Just saw the clock again. We'll be back and continue
With
after
Rush
this.
24.
Over. A little Guess Who in the bumper rotation, the EIB Network. And Tom in Manchester, New Hampshire. You're next. I'm glad you called, sir. Great to have you here with us.
It's an honor, Rush.
Thank you.
Been trying for years to get on, and I finally got on.
Oh, congratulations. Congratulations.
I tell you. And I hope all my friends are listening. My question is, they talk about meddling all the time.
Yeah, the Russians meddled. Everybody knows that. Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, the Russians meddled. We do talk about it. Everybody knows it, right?
What are they doing? What is meddling? No one ever says, all right, they fooled with the figures.
But they do. Oh, but they do. What now? Seriously, when you hear that the Russians meddling, what do you think of? You're really curious what they're talking about?
Well, yes. I mean, they did the stuff with Facebook, and they post ads.
Nah. Chump change. That's
right.
No. What? And by the way, to prove my point, folks, there's already a story out there. The Daily Beast is already saying Claire McCaskill is going to lose re-election, Missouri Senate, because of the Russians. They're already saying it. And she is in trouble. There's a great candidate running against her. They're already chalking it up, her loss that they're predicting to the Russians. Here's the meddling. There are two things. 55% of Democrats think when they hear the Russians meddled, they hear Russians changed votes. Other people, the meddling is the hacking of the Democrat National Committee server and the publishing of John Podesta's emails on WikiLeaks, which then found their way into the mainstream media. That's the hack. That's what Russian meddling is. But I'm guaranteeing most Democrats, when they hear Russian meddling, they think Russia got in there and changed enough votes for Trump to win.
Right. Well, that answers it. I mean, no one has taken the time on Hannity or Laura Ingraham.
Well, because it's stupid. It's stupid out there, Tom. It's stupid, this whole idea that the Russians meddled. The Russians always meddled. Hell, the Democrats meddled. The Democrats are meddling in the election of November right now. But it has the media, when they use this, and the Democrats, they have a specific purpose. They want people, when they hear the word meddling, to think the Russians changed votes. That the Russians were able to change the outcome of the presidential election. That is their purpose. That's why they keep saying Russians meddled. Now, when you have legal beagles on TV talking about Russian meddling, that's when you hear about the Russians hacking the Democrat server and learning all of these things about Podesta's emails, and it ended up at WikiLeaks. And then to a tertiary sense, Russian meddling is these troll farms buying advertising on Facebook and Twitter. But the meddling is meant to be interpreted as the Russians got into the voting machines and changed enough of them to elect Trump. Stupid. The saga continues. A man, a legend, a way of life. Larry Kudlow was on TV this morning, spoke after Trump went out and announced the growth rate of 4.1%. Oh, you know what? Before we do that, let's just do 25, 26, 27 in order here. Here's F. Chuck Todd. I mentioned this. This is F. Chuck Todd today on NBC's special coverage of Trump's remarks about the second quarter GDP news. And the info babe, Savannah Guthrie, said, meet the press moderator, F. Chuck Todd, whose wife works on the Bernie Sanders campaign, talking now about Trump's remarks. 4.1%. That's a rate we haven't seen in 4 years, F. Chuck. The president with a good economic story to tell. He wants to highlight it amidst, obviously, the Russia investigation and facing the midterm elections as well.
You could tell there was sort of an urgency in the president's voice that bordered on almost pulling a muscle, trying to pat yourself on the back. You could feel that he knows there's all these other headlines out there that are not good.
Stop the tape. I watched this. He didn't pull a muscle at all. This is an out-and-out falsehood. Trump didn't pull a muscle. He wasn't desperately trying to praise himself. He was simply trying to overcome this kind of bull crap. He went out there. He knew this was the kind of bull crap he was going to have to face after this great bit of economic news that this country hasn't seen in 8 years. He wasn't desperate. He wasn't this. He was very proud, and he should have been. All right. Resume this debacle of a
especially this morning involving Michael Cohen, involving the Russia investigation. Frankly, even on the economic front, he got a lot of grief about trade from even fellow Republicans while traveling in the Midwest. So
stop the
today
tape because they don't understand what they're talking about here. Even the Republicans don't even know how to talk about tariffs in the right way now. Anyway, that's F. Chuck Todd. That's F. Chuck Todd. As Trump's going out there after he's spoken about the 4.1% and the great economic results that we got from his policies, that's the drive-by media trying to tell you that Trump is desperate to change the subject because of Michael Cohen, because of the Russians investigation, and because of Mueller, and because of the Russians stealing the election and all that garbage. So Trump went out and spoke, and here is Kevin Hassett. He's the chairman of Council of Economic Advisors. And he's telling a little story about all that had happened in the Oval Office leading up to the policies that gave us this growth rate today.
We're very, very happy because remember, the president promised that his policies would deliver 3% growth. And, now we're looking at 4. One of the nuances in the data that's really striking and is very favorable for the second half of the year is that inventory subtracted about a whole percentage point from the GDP number. And so what happened was instead of producers being able to keep up with consumer demand and increase their production as the surge in their demand for their products occurred, they had to run down their inventories. And historically, when that happens, then they have to jack up production in the second half of the year to rebuild their stocks. And so, it's about as positive a report as you can get because it suggests that you're going to have sustained growth.
All right, that's not what I thought it was. That was Hassett appearing with Neil Cavuto on Fox. Hassett also appeared at the White House press conference today after Trump had spoke, and he told a story of the president and everybody discussing the tax policies and whether or not they could reach 4%. And he was telling everybody that would listen how Trump was insistent that it was going to happen, it could happen. There were some doubters in the room, and that now that everybody in there is a believer with the president. It was a comment talking about Trump's leadership. Here's Kudlow. Kudlow, this is at the White House. This is at the press conference. This is after Trump and after Hassett. And I think this is good because, Kudlow is a supply-side guru dating all the way back to the 80s and Reagan. He understands this stuff inside and out. He can recite it to you in his sleep. He's almost as good explaining this stuff as I am. And that's why I want to use this particular bite from Kudlow.
It is already beginning to work. Low tax rates, rollback of regulations, unleashing energy and trade reform to fix a broken world trading system. Business investment is booming. 9 to 10% growth in the first half of this year. I believe that's going to continue. Why do I talk about business investment? Well, that's the key to productivity, which is the key to growth, which is the key to rising real wages and very strong jobs. These tax cuts, particularly on the business and investment side, are going to be boosting wages, livelihoods, and jobs for middle American, ordinary working folks. And it's starting to take effect, and that's why I agree with the president. This is a boom that will be sustainable.
And then Kudlow, appearing on TV later, said that he can see 5%, maybe even 6%. So as the president, there's no reason not to. That all the pieces are in place. And as Kudlow's going through this, I'm thinking, I'm imagining some of these doomcoffs that live in Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez district that were interviewed by the campus reform guy. Can you imagine them listening to this and having the slightest idea what he's talking about? When he starts talking about such things as, well, we got low tax rates, we got business investment booming, they would hate that. Anything business does is bad. Business is mean. Business kills its customers. Business doesn't care. He says, why do I talk about business investment? Because that's a key to productivity. Productivity? What's that? What does productivity matter? That's a foreign language to these socialists. Productivity? They don't understand that. That's work. Productivity key to growth. What kind of growth? What do you mean, growth of government? No. Which is the key to rising real wages and very strong jobs. Can you imagine the average Alexandria Cortez voter translating this and understanding it? I can't. these tax cuts, particularly on the business and investments. Oh, man, you start talking business tax cuts, and they start throwing daggers at you with their eyes. They hate you. And it's also unnecessary. All such a shame, because Kudlow nailed it there. That's exactly what has happened, what's going to continue to happen, and it benefits everybody who wants to work. Anyway, Roger in Lake Havasu City, Arizona. It's great. You're next. Great to have you with us, sir. Hello.
It's my pleasure. Thank you so much for taking the call. Appreciate it very much.
Yes, sir.
The president assigned Chris Wray and Rod Rosenstein to their jobs, and they're undermining them by not providing the appropriate feedback to the Congress that they're supposed to. And my question is, why does the president tolerate that? Why doesn't he go down there and get him by the ear and say, do your job like you're supposed to, or I'll find somebody that will?
Well, we have asked that question here ourselves a number of times, and all I can do is give you the best guesstimate here as to why the president does not demand the disclosure of this stuff. And there are basically two answers, and maybe a third. The first answer, why doesn't the president just order the DOJ, Rosenstein and Wray, to release all this stuff that the House is legitimately asking for? Answer, he's afraid that everybody will start accusing him of tampering with the investigation. They will accuse him of obstruction of justice by order, because he is subject to the investigation. By ordering all of this detail of the investigation, he's afraid that's what his lawyers have told him. The second answer, Roger, which is my theory, is that the president knows there's nothing in there that's going to, he's not going to be indicted. No president's going to be indicted. There isn't a crime that anybody has found here. That what really is, the only weapon that Trump's enemies have right now is impeachment. That's the only thing that can come of this, and the Democrats have to win the House for that. So I think that the president kind of likes the David and Goliath story. I think he likes tweeting, which he did today. He likes tweeting about this witch hunt and about these unfair investigators. While he's out there doing the work of the country and trying to help the American people, these little ankle biters are out there still trying to take him down in a witch hunt investigation. So I think and then there may be a third element of this that is a kind of a combination of the two, which basically says that he knows that it's just a matter of time and that the outcome of this is going to be ultimately positive for him, and the closer it happens to the election, the better. So those are because you're right. He could declassify all this stuff this afternoon if he wanted to.
The Mueller investigation is supposed to be, what's the word I want to use? No conflict of interest, but there's supposed to be a specific crime. There's supposed to be a specific individual.
Well, there isn't.
None of which are true.
No, there isn't a crime. Mueller does not have a crime to investigate here. They've been trying to look for one. They've been trying to make it look like one happened. Just like the FBI planted spies in the Trump campaign to see if the Russians were interfering. That's not what they were. They were there to plant evidence that the Russians were interfering, not to find it. And they couldn't even do that. But remember, the key here, every case that Mueller has had, he's farmed it out. The Russians that he indicted a couple Fridays ago, that case has gone to the Department of Justice, to the Counter Intel Division, where there are never any trials because there's no crimes in Counter Intel investigations. The Cohen case, he has given off to the Southern District of New York. I mean, everything he's come up with, he's given to some other jurisdiction to prosecute or do with what they will. And impeachment, you have to understand something about impeachment. This is what this has always been about. The effort here has always been to drive Trump's approval numbers down. Impeachment is not a criminal proceeding. It's political. You can impeach a president if he hadn't committed any crime. You can try it. high crimes, misdemeanors, they are hoping to drive Trump's approval numbers now with all of this. They thought they would get that done in 6 months, Roger. They thought they would drive Trump's numbers down to the 20s where he had no support and would essentially have to resign. That has been the objective. Well, that failed. So now that's been replaced with a desire to drive his numbers down to the point that he loses. The Republicans lose the House, the Democrats win, and then they file impeachment charges, and with Trump's approval numbers hopefully way low, no way to defend himself, he resigns instead of going through the trial in the Senate. That's been the objective from the get-go. And they're not close on either of those two procedures. Not really. CNN website, October 11, 2016. It's a headline. Trump promises 4% growth. Economists say no way. October 11, 2016. Experts and the media seemingly are always wrong, and yet they keep citing the same experts. It's stupid and insane. Hey, folks, you know, even in times of a robust economy, there's still an element in society that likes to make their living breaking into homes. Burglars, the bad guys, they look for homes to hit that appear unprotected by either people or a security firm. In fact, you know what I saw? There was a story. I forget. I want to say New York Times, but it may not have been. But it was about this new wave of innovative home security systems out there, and how self-installation is so easy now because there aren't any wires. And I keep reading, I keep waiting to see Simply Safe, and I don't see it. Simply Safe is the leader in this. Simply Safe are the innovators. They're the people that created this new way of simplifying home security and having it be just as strong and just as reliable as anything else you can buy in the consumer market. And it really, really is. They have made home security affordable. They have made installing it simple and understandable. And that's done because there aren't any wires. I mean, that's why you can't install a home security system. You don't want to bother to run wires all over your house and rip out the floorboards or the drywall. You don't have to do any of that with Simply Safe. It uses Wi-Fi that replaces all the wires and the old tech. When you install a Simply Safe system in your home, you're still utilizing sensors on all your doors and windows just like all the other guys do, except there aren't any wires. You're using motion detectors. You're using sound detectors, sirens, everything you'd expect a system to have. HD cameras. You deploy them where you think they are best placed. You've got the base station in the house that they all report to via Wi-Fi. There's a break-in or something goes wrong, that base station emits a siren that, I mean, it'd make a freight train take a dirt road. That's how loud it can be. And if you want monitoring, if you want to have 24/7 monitoring, that's simple. $14.99 a month. That base station will call the cops and the fire department. I mean, it is the pinnacle of innovation, and you'll be amazed at how much it does not cost. Like the monthly monitoring is only $14.99 a month, and there aren't any contracts to sign. Everybody else is going to charge you around $50 and ask you to sign a 2-year contract. Quite simply, they have reinvented home security, which is good. It needs to be reinvented. Technological innovation taking into account. Buy the system online at simplysafeusa.com. That's it, simplysafeusa.com. 10% off the system you choose. And get this, you have 2 full months to use it and determine whether or not you like it. You realize what confidence that is? They're going to let you use the system for 60 days. And if you don't like it, after that amount of time, you can send it all back and you'll get all your money back. You won't do that. Very, very few do. You're going to become an evangel. You're going to become a believer in this. And you're going to, some cases, wish that you had done it sooner. SimplySafeUSA.com. Okay, I don't have enough time to play the soundbite here, but Mark Penn, the pollster from Harvard, the former Clinton pollster, was on Fox last night, and he's got another poll that's out there, and he's warning the Democrats that they could miss this whole election again by misidentifying what voters are focusing on and what they're concerned about, and it isn't Russia. And it isn't socialism. It's immigration and the economy. And he says they're nowhere near, and now they're denigrating 4.1% economic growth, and they want open borders. And he says if they're not careful, they're going to blow it big time again. See you Monday.